we're here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black heading into a somewhat busy weekend. We've got the UFC card on Sunday night in Boston. Invicta has a card. RFA has a card. But let's start off with Wanderlei Silva because he got his long-awaited release from the UFC. He still has to deal with all his issues with the Nevada Athletic Commission, who had said, we are never giving you a license ever again in this lifetime. So he still has that to combat. He will go in front of them yet again in February, but does get the release from the UFC, which does open up the ability to go fight for Ryzen, for instance, or any promotions that are not worried about upsetting the Nevada Athletic Commission or overriding a lifetime suspension.
Yeah, and Ryzen is the perfect fit. He's worked with the
promoters. You don't see Ryzen coming to the U.S.?
Never going to happen. Scott Coker's in the U.S., and that's why he has his relationship with those guys in Japan. But you want to talk about a fit, this is an absolutely perfect fit for Wanderlei Silva because I'm sure they'll cater to his style, they'll bring in the proper opponents to ensure entertainment, and I'm sure the talk of Fedor versus Wanderlei Silva will happen sometime down the road.
I did see that some legal people had pointed out that it is an improper, and I think Nevada has admitted that it was kind of a little reactionary to say it's a lifetime ban. So at some point, he will be reinstated anyways in North America. I mean, he's a beloved fighter who's given us some incredible fights. I mean, not some incredible fights, some mind-blowing fights. So you hope if the guy still loves fighting, and we know that he does, that he gets a chance to fight. And you're right, Japan is the right place.
Yeah, and you do have to go back quite a ways. I mean, he avoided a drug test, and that was in mid-2014. So we're coming up. It's already been 18 months since this was sent down to him. It's going to be a question of if they look at this in February and say, well, this is retroactive to such and such a date. It's a 2-year ban, for instance, and he would be eligible this summer. I could see Bellator being very leery of sending fighters over to Ryzen when they are using a fighter that is still technically suspended in the U.S., but it does open that door.
And those talks will happen.
And come the 2-year mark, certainly Bellator, I mean, this is the perfect candidate of what Bellator is looking for in 2016, a level of a guy with a name value that comes with Wanderlei Silva.
Yeah, Wanderlei and Tito. I mean,
Man, but on top of that, I think that
Wanderlei Dada 5000.
Don't let him kill that man.
Kimbo and Wanderlei Silva on free TV, people would love to see that. But I'm sure Scott Coker would reach out to Wanderlei Silva. They're outrageous, but seriously, think about it. Would you not tune into that if casual or hardcore fans see Kimbo Slice versus Wanderlei Silva? I'm pretty sure we all know what we're doing on Friday night.
I love Wanderlei as a fan and as a guy. Like, we know him pretty well, and he's a beloved. He's like your dad. Like, you just want to hug Wanderlei. But I don't want to see him murder a guy. I don't want to see him kill Kimbo Slice.
He's not allowed to soccer kick or stomp, so I think it might be okay.
He can still literally end Kimbo Slice's life.
But I would not be surprised, though, if Scott Coker reached out to Wanderlei Silva and his team. They have their meeting to say, hey, we want to bring you into this organization. We're going to keep you on the sidelines. As soon as you're good to go, as soon as the Athletic Commission reinstates you, we're going to have you fight.
Well, you remember last year they tried to get Wanderlei out for a fan fest, and the UFC stopped that. They could very well have Wanderlei just in a couple of weeks in Houston at that fan fest and get the talk going. And we see him in the arena. I mean, not fighting, obviously, but could certainly make an appearance. He's now free to do that.
Don't let him kill Dada 12,000 or whatever he is. Like, don't let him kill that
Kimbo
guy.
calls him out afterwards. Even better, Dada 5,000 calls out Wanderlei Silva. Many different options for the man, but you really have to wait until he gets his hearing in front of the Nevada Athletic Commission. But certainly that's a big hurdle that they clear. Now, another person who is in action this weekend, though, is Cris Cyborg Justino. She's going to be fighting on the Invicta card, defending her women's featherweight championship. She has discussed so many times the idea of getting down to 135. It seems like that has pretty much
not happening anymore.
It's been given up at this point because you have to look at the amount of opportunities she has had that if she was dead set on making 135, I truly believe over time she could have made this weight. And this fight in March very well could have been her fighting Holly Holm instead of Miesha Tate. I just question that how many millions this woman's left on the table of opportunities, and her complaining about not getting this fight and people not coming to 145 for her, I think it's kind of exhausted at this point. This woman clearly doesn't want to make 135, and that's her choice. She doesn't have to. But there was a big opportunity, and Robin, you talked about it. If she wanted to make it to 135 and you chart out 18 months, she could have gotten there.
Easily, very easily. You can do it in 8 months. You could do it in 4 months. I mean,
You can do it healthy. Like, we're not saying
easily
kill yourself.
Easily do it healthy.
There are smart people she could work with. She was working with George Lockhart. She could have gotten down to this weight in a healthy manner.
It's easy to do. Outside of the 60 hours a week we work here, we do like to go and hang out and read message boards and have fun on kind of those things and go on Reddit and the underground and stuff. It's what we consume all the time.
I haven't heard of any of these places, by the way.
I don't think I've ever seen anything as like aggressively put your flag in the sand and debate something as much as this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the fact is, there are many reasons she might not want to for her own self. Psychological reasons. People who are really muscular sometimes psychologically do not want to get smaller. And there's even, and this is not the case, I'm certainly not saying it's the case, but in extreme cases, it is very much like a reverse anorexic situation where no matter how you look in the mirror, you still feel like a 99-pound weakling and you always want to be big. So there can be psychological, personal reasons. But it takes 7 enormous meals a day to stay that big. It takes hard work to stay that big and muscular if you're a woman. Hard, dedicated work. All you got to do is reel that work in, and you'll get smaller. It's guaranteed.
What about Nick Lentz, though? Nick Lentz recently talking about BJ Penn saying, I'm never fighting at 145 pounds ever again. BJ Penn should never be fighting at that weight because it's not healthy. Now, why is he saying that?
Well, I mean, after doing it 9 times and competing it 9 times and doing it as a living for 7 years, he came to that conclusion. That's fine. There's also, I mean, look at Nick Lentz's body. It's a tough one. There are elements we cannot talk about because you can't accuse people of doing certain things. But but that doesn't mean that as a knowledgeable analyst you don't know things.
Right.
That in the USADA thing they call it the smell test. But there are a lot of people that were lean and muscular and ripped that are now round and big, and they haven't all decided to do it because it's healthier. Some of them have done it because with the new stringent testing, there are things that guys used and didn't mind using, certain diuretics and cutting anabolics and stuff that were used commonplace in the game that are not used anymore. And some of those people will need to say it's not healthy to go down anymore. You'll see a ton of fighters. Guys who were champions at 145, guys who were champions at 135 are going to go up. Did they all of a sudden, at the exact same time that they were drug testing, say this will be healthier? Or was the drug testing in some small way connected to that?
And that to me speaks to, like, this has permeated the UFC roster where there is that fear. When I talked to Eddie Alvarez this week and other guys like Ryan Bader, they've echoed this, the fact that USADA is showing up at 6:30 in the morning.
Northcutt, it's happened a bunch of times.
Sage Northcutt. I mean, that's the little secret, is that something like HGH, for instance, which has a very small window in your body, like 8 to 10 hours, you're not taking that in the morning so that all day long you're vulnerable. You're taking it right before you go to bed because who's showing up? And they are at 6 in the morning
that's
to
why
try
they're showing
and surprise
up at 6.
guys.
They're
and
trying to catch guys on HGH.
that fear is very real for fighters. Whether they believe they're going to be caught, they're thinking twice about things.
This is an entire separate conversation because it's very complicated. And you need to have it without any kind of judgment. And we all automatically have judgment. It's like, those guys were cheaters. You have to place yourself in an environment where you are fairly sure that the other people that you're competing against may be doing something. And then imagine what you may or may not be willing to do outside of your own ethical beliefs. But when you suddenly got Yoel Romero and 2 other guys at ATT, and ATT was always rumored to be that gym. Who were the other guys recently? Yoel Romero, you had Hector, and you had the huge guy who has 30 fights.
Gleison Tibau.
Yeah. We all knew those guys were doing drugs. Now they're caught. This will change things. No judgment. It's how it was. This will change things now.
All right, we've got more of Fight News Now coming up, so stay tuned. And we are back on Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time for a 1-hour preview show looking ahead at the UFC Fight Night card from Boston. And then the prelims are airing here on Fight Network in Canada. 4 fights from the TD Garden, including Patrick Cote and Ben Saunders in action in the welterweight division.